Up in here. Oh, yeah. Yes. I know you guys don't like the wait screen, so we're trying to make sure that we wait as little as possible. Boom. What's up, sons? It's Blind Rod with Son of a Tech once again, and welcome to yet another crypto mining show, your one-stop shop for all cryptocurrency news from the perspective of a cryptocurrency miner. And boy, do we got a lot going on this week, huh? Especially if we're looking at cryptocurrency as a whole from the top down, from the miner perspective. It is one of those things where what we said was possible is coming into fruition with proof of stake and everything that has been going on, specifically with the SEC coming down on Kraken, however you want to say it. The responses from Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong, which is extremely interesting. And then we also have this battle going on between kind of the parties, the big government versus the little government guys. But in a weird fashion, we are seeing this kind of allowance that's been guaranteed for Bitcoin in particular. And that really sets us up for a very good position as cryptocurrency miners moving forward in the United States because, well, as far as everything else goes, it's up in the air as to whether or not it's a security. I mean, it's pretty much guaranteed at this point that it's going to be leaning towards a security if it is proof of stake. Now, proof of work coins too, though, do fall into this category according to Gary Gensler, except for Bitcoin. So there's been this weird confirmation of an allowance for Bitcoin. We're going to be getting into that and more. We're going to be starting today off, though, talking about CBDCs and the CBDC dollar in particular, and how that would empower the federal government, but not Americans. And this is an opinion piece coming from, of all places, the Wall Street Journal. So we're going to take a look at this opinion piece. I did get access to it, and I am going to share it with you guys because it's really interesting. And then we're going to get into the rest of the topics for the day. I have a lot of announcements coming from smaller coins as well, things that we're going to be talking about, and miner releases too. And I'll show you guys what I'm mining that's currently profitable in my farm. And we will then, of course, wrap up with mining profitability overall on GPUs and some things that are happening. Behind me, I got a couple GPUs laying here. So take a look at those, and we're going to talk also about the pricing of this one in particular and how appealing it is getting right now. So let's get into it right after a word from today's sponsor, and enjoy. Today's sponsor is CoinLedger. CoinLedger understands that crypto tax reporting can be difficult and is here to help. CoinLedger integrates with popular crypto applications and exchanges like Coinbase and MetaMask. Seamlessly import your CoinLedger tax reports into TurboTax and feel at ease. For a limited time, check the description on this video for a chance to win a free CoinLedger tax report. Get started for free today at coinledger.io by following the links in the description. Use promo code SONOFATECH for 10% off. And welcome back. So make sure you guys go ahead and sign up for that free giveaway to get your crypto taxes done. Every click does, of course, help the channel. They are a sponsor that in the bear market is definitely few and far between. So if you guys are looking at trying to figure out your taxes, go give them a shot. I will be doing a dedicated video for them here coming up soon. We'll be talking about how to work the application. So if you're interested in that, definitely stay tuned. Let's get into this opinion piece first off and go from there, because this is a big one. A CBDC dollar would empower the Fed, not Americans. Anyone who believes in limited government should not support a central bank digital dollar. That is the subtitle. And, you know, we've been preaching this for a while, so it's kind of funny to see this coming out of the Wall Street Journal. Of course, we'll have to see how they approach it and what they specifically state here. Now, this is an opinion piece, but my opinion aligns with basically the premise here that if you do believe in limited government, you shouldn't support a central bank digital dollar. But I think it goes a lot deeper than that, especially as we start to see what the current CBDC implementations in China are and what is being adopted in the UK. So when we look at China, one of the things that's really come to fruition that is alarming, to say the least, is the push for an expiration date on the cryptocurrency itself, meaning, and this is on the CBDC, specifically the digital yuan. What this pushes people into, of course, is a position of inability to work themselves or save themselves out of their current economic situation. You see, in the past, the way you as an individual set yourself up to take care of yourself in your older age, to pass down wealth to your children, your grandchildren, to future generations in your family line, is to save, right? And what this allows people to do is to break out of whatever economic situation they may be in and break into a higher income bracket. This allows you to also have some security. And without that, what you end up having, essentially, if you don't have the ability to save, what that ends up doing is not allowing people to move up economically, especially generation over generation, right? Typically, like, building that generational wealth usually has some sort of component of being able to hold any sort of currency or assets that you own. But if you're in the position where you work and then you get paid and you have to spend that money within a specific timeline, or it no longer exists, then you are forced to essentially work nonstop for the rest of your life, and you will have nothing to pass down to your children. There are ways that will be utilized to get around this, of course, like purchasing assets. And I think that all in all, that is like a pretty clear path out, which is purchasing assets. But what happens when those assets are difficult to move, right? If you have cash, it's a little bit easier because it's lightweight. If you have a digital access to your accounts via a bank that's going to provide that for you later, makes it a little bit easier. But the end game here really for passing down wealth to future generations, in my humble opinion, does appear to be leaning towards cryptocurrency. And that is because if you have to do something with the money, you might as well put it into an asset that's easily movable, not only between individuals, but also between borders, right? And it's going to be a lot easier to move a cryptocurrency throughout, across borders than it is to move, well, even fiat currency. But in the case that it's expiring, well, what's the point in that? So this is really kind of setting us up here for an interesting conversation where it's like the movements of the current economic status into what is commonly referred to as modern monetary theory, which is going to be essentially just a non-stop generation of currency and basically trying to spur on the purchase of consumer goods, which is what they're trying to do. And if we're going to be able to combat that, right? And I think that this is going to be a really interesting time to live through. And let's get into this opinion piece a little bit further. It says a growing number of Democrat and Republican policymakers support creating a central bank digital currency, or CBDC, that would further empower the Federal Reserve. Although the parties disagree on the particulars, their broad agreement on the idea creates a political opening for the Fed and the Biden administration to move ahead with the CBDC that will compromise, Americans' freedoms. Some lawmakers say a CBDC, which is a digital dollar issued by the Fed, could help stave off a debt crisis and preserve the dollar's status as the world's reserve currency. This is extremely important because a digital currency in and of itself would not stave this off. The manner in which it is deployed and managed is what would stave it off. So you can already start to see through the facade, at least pretty quickly, when you look at how, like I said, it's being implemented already on the digital yuan, and how the UK is going to be copying this modern monetary policy, that the real goal here is to spur on the spending of Americans on consumer goods, consumer products. It's always been this way, right? Like, to a certain extent, we are just like building on top of it. It's a house of cards, right? It will collapse at some point. And the entire goal is to try to get it to essentially continue on for as long as possible. And if you are in a position where the US dollar is essentially compromised by individuals holding that US dollar or having some sort of power over that by not spending it, then you are not stimulating the economy. And so it wouldn't be completely out of the realm of possibilities that a CBDC in the United States would adopt similar policies here, especially if you read this statement. But that will be seen later on. Not everyone is persuaded that such a currency is a good idea. Neil Kashkari, the president of the Minneapolis Federal Reserve, questioned why Americans would support a CBDC, saying, quote, "If they want to monitor everyone for your of your transactions, you can do that with a central bank digital currency," end quote. He said at a conference last year, continuing, "I get why China would be interested. Why would the American people be for that?" is what he goes on to say. Early Democratic support was concentrated among progressives such as Senator Elizabeth Warren, who obviously Democrat of Massachusetts, coming from Massachusetts, and Fed Vice Chair Lael Brainerd. But the sweeping scope of President Biden's CBDC executive order in March signals broad acceptance within his party. By mobilizing government agencies and departments to prepare for a CBDC, Mr. Biden made clear that his administration is ready to take up this newfound power when the opportunity presents itself. For Democrats, the party of big government, the appeal is obvious. A CBDC would allow the federal government to spend more money, manage outcomes, and provide financial services to the unbanked. And this is an important part too, because when we start to discuss the unbanked, what we're really talking about here is the people that are basically in need of government assistance. And if you have a population that is in need of government assistance, right, and you can control that assistance through a digital platform, starting off, of course, with the implementation of free cell phones for people that are homeless or underprivileged, that sort of thing, which has already been implemented. And then it comes installed, with an app that accesses your Medicaid, your unemployment, anything along those lines, right? Any sort of government service means that your adoption rate goes through the roof, especially when the economy is poor, right? So if you have an economy that is struggling. You have more and more people dependent on the government for sustenance, right? For their day-to-day just ability to live and eat and function within society. Then you have an automatic adoption rate right there. Furthermore, when people say that the adoption rate wouldn't be that high in the United States, you have to also consider the fact that what we saw with, in particular, the disbursements for the pandemic relief stuff all went through basically a digital dispersion through your bank account that was already clearly, as they exposed, something that they already had access to. And this means that the only thing that's really standing between the government, the Federal Reserve here in this case, and direct control over the individual does become the banking system, which actually ends up being extremely interesting as we start to watch this new digital economy play out, right? Because what we're at right now, the crossroad is essentially a crossroad into the new digital finance, right? That's what's happening. And whoever can control that will obviously have an extreme amount of power. And that's important to pay attention to. But the thing is too, here's where I was going with that. If you are even middle class, let's say, here's the deal. If you are just in general an employee of any company, then typically you have taxes being held out of your check. And the only way you can access any of those taxes that are held out of your check at the end of the year, if you are in a financially compromised position, is to do what? File a tax return, right? So to do that, if they implement basically a CBDC allotment or disbursement of tax returns, you basically increase your adoption rate for a CBDC, exponentially. Because at that point, you have to realize that a majority of the population is in this situation where they put too much in, they pay too many taxes. And then when it gets to the end of the year, the government pays them back, right? They give back whatever extra that they took. And it's been a whole scheme from the very get-go because it's an incredibly effective business model, right? Because what is happening is a majority of Americans are overpaying throughout the entire year, and you can take and make that money that's being paid and make investments and whatever else on that, and then not have to pay it back till the end of the year. It's a win-win. Like, this is where you end up in a position where when people tell me that this wouldn't happen, a CBDC wouldn't be adopted by Americans, I'm like, it basically is already implemented, at least like these potentially damaging parts to individuals' finances. And if people want to actually get that back, they're going to adopt this. It's kind of a duh moment, right? Like, a CBDC will be quickly adopted by middle and lower class, by the working class in general. And that's just the fact of the matter. The centralization of power that a CBDC would allow runs counter to the Republican Party's intent to disperse power and shrink government. So it's startling to see the GOP policymakers entertain the idea. And, we could go into, at least from the United States perspective, of, well, you know what, like, sure, but we're pretty aware that it's turned into a uniparty at this point, right? The Republican, if it's a uniparty, if it comes down to, and when it comes down to the thing that matters, which is really at the end of the day, money. Right? Like, if we're going to be completely honest about the entire ruse here, is like, everything else that aligns politically, like down a party line, is purely at this point a distraction away from big banks, the Federal Reserve, and everything that's going on there. If you start to look at when the real kind of separation of party lines and this radicalization of the two parties on topics ranging from abortion to LGBT to whatever else, you'll notice that all started kind of right after that push for Occupy Wall Street, right? Which was like the 99% versus the 1%, which is really 99.9% versus the 0.1%, if we're being completely honest about everything. And I would posture that a majority of these issues that are placed in front of our eyes on a day-to-day basis are just distractions to stop us from paying attention to what is really going on. And as we move closer and closer to the digital finance revolution, it's becoming more and more apparent, which is a good thing, but it is only going to be a good thing if people actually decide to start opting out. There is a push comes to shove that I think happens no matter what, personally. So in 2021, French Hill, Republican of Arkansas, and Jim Himes, Democrat, Connecticut, co-sponsored legislation encouraging the Fed to keep researching a CBDC. In November, Paul Ryan, the former GOP Speaker of the House, and Kevin Warsh, the former Fed Vice Chair, endorsed a CBDC in a book for the American Enterprise Institute. Some Republican proponents of a digital dollar say their party's version of a CBDC would enhance liberty, not government control. They favor a two-tier system using a CBDC exclusively between the Federal Reserve and providers of financial services. Now, what does this actually mean? This is the line that the Republicans will use, and this is the front line of the actual battle that's going to take place before the individual is encompassed into this battle, right? So if we say, for example, that what we are going to see is something along the lines of what the sovereign individual predicted in that book, which I highly recommend you check out if you have not yet, then you would say eventually, due to the digital revolution, especially once finance is involved, the individuals will have autonomy and have financial freedom, and this will start to dissolve nation states. But before that could even happen, there has to be another battle that takes place. And whether we get past this battle ever is yet to be seen, obviously, but this battle that's going to happen will be between not the individual and the nation states, but the banks and the nation states. And what you're seeing here is that getting set up right now. Both parties are for essentially some sort of digital dollar, but one is supporting the banks. And that's probably coming from, of course, lobbyists and so on within the banks. So when you hear the Republican version of a CBDC versus the Democrat version of the CBDC, just know that that is banks versus the federal government. Just understand that that's what that is actually alluding to. And don't get mixed up on like, the Republicans are really fighting for the individual here, because that's not what's happening. They are just the banks in this situation, right? That is what they are. So moving on from there, by having private enterprise serve as a buffer between the Fed and the American people, Mr. Ryan argues that the centralizing power of the CBDC won't be merely muted, but inverted. And this is what I've said before too, is like, you are in this battle as an individual, right? In this competition between banks and basically an intermediary between banks and the Federal Reserve, and the banks still dispersing out to the individual, that would be status quo, meaning that that is more decentralized. So fundamentally, you would want to be on the side of the banks in this scenario. 48 laws of power, for example. You sit back, you don't throw in full support to either side, and you let the sides fight it out so that when it comes to the fight that you need to have as an individual or as a collective of individuals versus kind of the system, hopefully they have weakened themselves, meaning the enemy is, yes, banking as well as the federal government here, as far as I should say, the enemy of decentralization are banks and federal government, but you kind of want to sit back and let them duke it out so that they're weaker later on down the line. This is just a fun kind of idea that I've been getting from 48 Laws of Power, and when we look at it from that stage. So who am I rooting for here? Well, I'm going to root for, of course, the banks in this sort of battle. That being said, sit back and let them duke it out. I don't need to go jump in on any of this, right? We're not going to be throwing on masks and heading down to Occupy Wall Street anymore. We'll let the banks and the federal government, Federal Reserve fight over this, right? By having private enterprise serve as a buffer between the Fed and the American people, he argues that centralizing power won't be merely muted but inverted. He says, we can show the world how a free society should handle this challenge by having a two-tier system, which guarantees the government has no role in the management of our money, Mr. Ryan said in an interview promoting the book. But once again, I say, this is status quo. This is how it functions as it is. So basically, as everything between these two parties typically plays out, the Republicans are fighting for status quo and the Democrats are fighting for the progressive modern monetary policy. That is really what you're seeing here, right? And it's in the name, right? You say Republicans, you think conservatives, and so on, right? You say Democrats, you think progressives. It's right there in the name. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out which side these parties would jump onto, right? So moving on from there, the vision ignores the fact that financial intermediaries can't protect their users' data from the federal government. Just last month, it was revealed that the Secret Service, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Federal Bureau of Investigation have been engaged in an almost decade-long warrantless financial surveillance of Americans who send or receive money through private operators such as Western Union and MoneyGram. It's naive to think that a government that is currently combing through individual financial information will stop doing so when it has the formidable power of a CBDC. Obviously, what does a CBDC do even in the status quo, right? So even if, let's say we go with Plan B, which is a two-tier system. Plan A we'll just refer to, well, let's say, yeah, I kind of wanted to save Plan B for Bitcoin, but and maybe for a pre-recorded video, we'll set this all up and have it lined out, and I'll get all my fun talking points here. But let's just say we go with a two-tier system here. All a CBDC does is make everything it just makes everything that's being done in the current status quo that much easier, right? The invasion of privacy, it makes it easier. Tracking what you do, it makes it easier. Like, it doesn't make it any more difficult, right? So you are still going in the direction of centralization regardless of what anybody wants to tell you there. In addition, Congress has proved itself incapable of auditing the Fed or holding it to account. Unlike the intelligence agencies, the central bank was designed to be unaccountable. The Fed is a semi-private bank supervised by 7 governors serving 14-year terms. Its budget isn't appropriated by Congress, granting this already unaccountable institution more authority over our money would further empower the Fed's 20,000 plus employees, not the American people. Republicans backing a CBDC failed to recognize that making dollar transactions more efficient won't magically preserve the greenback's reserve currency status or keep the federal debt from growing. Maintaining the dollar's global position will require the Fed to manage the way dollars are used. Once again, I'm going to go back to this and you guys need to pay attention to it. Understand, this isn't crazy tinfoil hat anymore. The digital yuan is moving into having an expiration date. In the proposal in the UK for their digital currency, they are also saying that they will basically implement an expiration date. The importance, the way you stimulate the economy here is putting an expiration date on the currency that you pay out to the people so that they are forced to spend it. And this just basically builds up the house of cards a little bit taller, right? It means that you can continue this ruse just a little bit longer. It just means that everything that's been going on can be done a little bit more. This is why what you will see in general, of course, is a complete shift in the monetary policy, especially from the Democratic Party. The idea here, of course, is we're already talking about removing the debt ceiling. Why would you need to remove the debt ceiling? Because you need to basically accumulate a ton of debt, disperse it out, and then start burning it, right? What we're seeing here is literally what we see with coins that are getting in trouble for doing the same thing, because you now have a burn mechanism. You have an expiration of the token, but whose cryptocurrency in these cases, or of course digital currencies in these cases, is being burned? The actual people, not the people that run the entire system, right? It's like if you get into Hex or SafeMoon, like every time you purchase some, it's burning some of what you purchased, thereby just increasing the value for the people that are holding it, or already holding it, or are already whales within that. But the little guy that's just getting into it is the one that's getting burned here. He's the one who's losing the currency. This policy will basically implement that burn mechanism. So step 1, remove debt ceiling. Step 2, deploy the CBDC, disperse out to the people, apply some sort of mechanism that burns it after a certain amount of expiration, and then bing, bang, boom, you got yourself a nice little national level, Federal Reserve level Ponzi scheme going on. Policymakers in Washington have a choice between preserving a bloated federal government or putting America back on the path to limited government by uniting to stop a CBDC. One second, guys. There we go. Sorry. Excuse me. Had a call coming in I had to address real quick. So by uniting to stop a CBDC, Republicans can take the side of the American people. But if the GOP fractures on this issue, the Biden administration is ready to push through a CBDC and give the government even more power over Americans' money and lives. Mr. Feeler is president and chief investment officer of Equinox Partners and chairman of the American Principles Project. This is posted by Wall Street Journal. It is an opinion piece, but it is an opinion piece coming from typically what would be a publication that would align with the Democrats, usually, right? So when we read this, we need to take into account that this does mean that there's a lot here that is warranted as far as concerns. So I wanted to go over this one with you guys. I want to hear your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. Of course, in the live chat too, once we get to the questions and answers at the end of the show. Either way, what we will see, like I said, what I would focus on here is how you can function and be successful moving into what is inevitable, meaning like we are going to inevitably move into a digital financial system, and you need to be looking for opportunities here to set yourself up and of course your spawns, right, in a good position. Because if we do end up in a position where you have expirations on things like this, I think the public will also start to be forced into basically opting out, meaning what will be really interesting is, if you have a bunch of digital currency that's expiring, dump it into Bitcoin, right? This is what starts to inevitably happen. And then you almost end up like literally just having all of that come into fruition, where the adoption of a CBDC spurs on what has been predicted or by something like by the book, the Sovereign Individual, right? So earlier this week, we had the SEC talking about banning cryptocurrency staking. First reports of this was coming from rumors from Brian Armstrong, the CEO of Coinbase. It said Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong pitched in on the speculation, citing that if the SEC bans staking, it could derail the cryptocurrency markets in terms of growth. The rumors gained momentum after SEC's Chairman Gary Gensler, previously stated that cryptocurrencies allowing staking options could be classified as securities under the Howey test. Now, we've been talking about this for like a year now. I don't even know. Like way back when we were talking about Ethereum moving to proof of stake and the risks that basically entailed, it was clear that Gary had already talked about this. They had already made this statement. So when the rumor mill started spinning here this week, I was like, is there anything new here, right? Because as far as I'm concerned, he's said this before. Where is the action, right? And then what will be the consequential reaction from the cryptocurrency market if that were to happen? In the particular case of Ethereum, they've put themselves in an extremely odd position moving to proof of stake. But where this is actually kind of coming from is the centralized security portion, where something like FTX is offering some sort of interest rates on basically holding your cryptocurrency. So it hasn't applied to necessarily yet something like Ethereum in particular, where we have a decentralized system that's staking it. That being said, could the government find a position of control over Ethereum throughout this, and specifically the US government? Because a lot of people want to say, well, Ethereum's internationally used, blah, blah, blah. Sure, okay, cool. Until you look at the actual infrastructure that's being deployed, and we're talking about over 50% of it being in the United States, and a majority of that being hosted on services by big tech. So if you want to be completely honest about what is actually happening here, and if the US government would have some influence over basically stomping out something like Ethereum, yes, they do, because big tech, as you know, is very tightly integrated with the government. And if it came down to push came down to shove, having Amazon shut down all servers and all nodes running Ethereum nodes, right? It's going to be done. That could be done. Sure. Can you recover from that, host in different locations? Yeah, presumably that would be a possibility. Now, there is this question, and we're minors, so we're going to talk about it. There's this kind of thing going around where people are like, oh, well, would this mean that like Ethereum could move back to proof of work? And first of all, the answer to that would be yes, they could, right? So is it technically possible for Ethereum to move back to proof of work? Yes. Would they do it? Probably not. And then would it solve the problem, which is the bigger question? And the answer is no. And the reason why the answer is no is because what Ethereum does in particular is that it supports decentralized finance. And just by nature of how that functions, which means every token on top of the Ethereum blockchain is basically susceptible to this particular definition of staking options and passing the Howey test. Meaning that the entire reason that Ethereum is so successful is the exact thing that would basically make it vulnerable to any laws that would say that staking is not allowed. Every project on top of Ethereum would not be allowed, and therefore, thereby, every project or Ethereum itself, whether it's proof of work or proof of stake, would be susceptible. So even if you had a situation where you said, okay, well, we'll move to proof of work to solve this problem, it doesn't actually solve the problem. So from the miner's perspective, just want to give you guys that kind of like, hey, take a step back, look at the big picture here. It's not that simple, right? Armstrong mentioned that the SEC planning to ban cryptocurrency staking is a terrible idea. He said, we're hearing rumors that the SEC would like to get rid of crypto staking in the US for retail customers. I hope that's not the case, as I believe it would be a terrible path for the US if that was allowed to happen, tweeted Armstrong. And here's really where that comes down to is like understanding that this is in particular retail customers, which as far as I understand would be specifically targeting centralized exchanges that offer staking services. So if you were talking about, right now, as we're aware of it, it being applied to Ethereum specifically as a token or a coin, right? Then the answer is no. But it will apply to things like Coinbase, Kraken, which we're going to get into here, and so on. So then it kind of gets a little further down and we can kind of start to talk about what is happening with Kraken. So what does Kraken's SEC settlement mean for the crypto staking? This is coming from CoinDesk. Kraken has pretty lousy day, but the industry is more interested in what this means for staking. The narrative is the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission announced charges against crypto exchange Kraken on Thursday. I'm going to say Kraken over and over. I don't know. I haven't picked one yet. Alleging its offering of a crypto staking as a service program amounted to offering unregistered securities products in the U.S. to settle the charges. Kraken is paying $30 million and shutting all of its U.S. staking services. The actions raised a number of questions about what this means for staking at large in the US. Before we get further into this, it's worth defining some terms. Proof of stake is a consensus mechanism wherein nodes are supported by people locking up or staking their crypto. It differs from proof of work consensus mechanisms in that rather than putting energy and computing power into securing the blockchain, you're putting your money. Staking has gotten an increasing amount of attention in recent years, especially in 2022, after Ethereum, the world's second most valuable cryptocurrency network, transitioned from proof of work to proof of stake. Companies offer staking services in the US because operating your own node just isn't as easy as letting someone else do it for you. And he says, I'm not judging. Now, we've talked about this before too, though, and I've always been against, personally, utilizing any centralized entity to perform your stake. And there still seems to be a lack of education on the topic, so let me explain this one more time. As it pertains to Ethereum in particular, people have been saying that, well, I can go ahead and pull my staked Ethereum out. That is not the case. That is not what's happening on the blockchain. That is not being recorded as that type of transaction. What you're actually doing is purchasing a token that represents a staked Ethereum. Staked Ethereum cannot be unstaked at this time. We will see if that is enabled with the Shanghai upgrade. Understand that the very nature of you unstaking your Ethereum actually puts the entire network at risk too, because essentially you are taking something that is not being able to be realized on the market and pretending that it can be, right? This has been a problem that we've talked about with Ethereum for a long time. I just want to clarify that one more time before we talk about this some more. Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong raised the alarm on Wednesday when he tweeted about rumors the SEC was targeting retail staking at large. But it seems to me that what's really happening is the SEC is going after companies like Kraken, which are offering staking services and promising their customers some kind of yield. Let's look at SEC Chair Gary Gensler's own past remarks to set a bit of a baseline here. In September, he said staking could meet the parameters of the Howey test. He highlighted intermediaries in an interview with the Wall Street Journal, saying staking through an intermediary looks very similar with some changes of labeling to lending. Some of the big questions bouncing around after Kraken announcement and, to be quite frank, Armstrong's tweet include whether the SEC is going after all staking in the US, how crypto companies can actually offer staking services, and whether the SEC would offer any guidance for companies hoping to offer services without drawing the agency's ire. An SEC official speaking at a media briefing after the settlement's announcement told reporters that the agency basically looks at the offering of staking service as being similar to offering any other type of security. In other words, companies hoping to offer staking services would have to register as a securities platform with the regulator, get SEC division and corporation finance approval to offer the product, and file regular disclosures. The security in this case was the investment program itself, meaning the representatives Kraken made in offering the product and the agreement it entered into with its users, another official said. SEC Commissioner Hester Pierce, in one of her most fiery dissents to date, pointed out that the mere act of registering may be more complex than at first glance. Quote, an offering like the staking service at issue here raises a whole host of complicated questions, including whether the staking program as a whole would be registered or whether each token staking program would be separately registered and what the accounting implications would be for Kraken, she said. The officials declined to comment on whether the case had implications on staking at large. Another component of the lawsuit the SEC filed against Kraken noted that the company determined what the staking rewards would be for users. The exchange was not just sending the actual protocol rewards to Kraken's investors. And this is a problem that I've had with all of these centralized entities in general. They promise a certain return. And in reality, once again, what's happening on the centralized exchange that you are utilizing is not what's happening on the chain. And you need to start understanding how blockchain functions so that you can stop getting screwed over by centralized entities that do this, because you can go into and find success with adding liquidity in a decentralized manner that puts the responsibility on you as an individual. And also that means it gives you more power over your decisions. You need to understand that this is what is happening. And I'm going to restate it over and over again because it seems to be that no matter how many times I talk about it, I go out into the real world or I get on Twitter, it doesn't actually matter. I talk to someone and they have a complete misconception of what is actually happening here. And it's a concern, right? So we need to educate people on this stuff. This may be a big factor here, as attorney Gabe Shapiro points out. This likely does make a big difference legally. An SEC official did say during the briefing the agency couldn't comment much on this aspect, though the official did say not to read too much into it. So don't read too much into it. We're just coming down on Kraken. And it's like, okay, well, you're going to come down on Kraken now, Mr. Gary, but you're sitting there being all buddy-buddy with FTX for a while. Is it because you don't have control over Kraken? Because while I would never condone that you guys go ahead and sit out there and participate in what's happening at Kraken, it is important to note that this is targeted when there are things going on that need to be brought into question, specifically with Gary Gensler's interaction with FTX. And luckily, we do have Representative Bill, I can't pronounce his last name, I apologize, going ahead and requesting four documents surrounding interactions between the SEC and SBF and FTX official here in particular. And this is extremely important because he brings up a good point that, like, or other people have brought up good points, excuse me, in replies and so on, that it's like, well, we're going to come down on Kraken, but what was going on here, right? So this is the official. It's posted on Twitter. I think that this is going to be extremely enlightening. Hopefully we get some information out of it. Because as we know, there's been a lot of corruption as well surrounding FTX and basically the U.S. government, with alleged even money laundering through the Ukraine government all the way back through FTX and back to political donations. Now, my understanding is most of those have been returned or donated to other entities, but it still happened, right? And we see kind of FTX getting off light with even announcing, a couple weeks ago, or I think it was even last week, that they're going to reboot the service. And it's like, well, why are they even allowed to reboot? But then you're over here coming down on Kraken. My assumption would be is that Kraken is a lot less controlled in this particular situation. So there you go, guys. This is everything that is as crazy as it could get within the realization of the future of digital finance. And I think it's important to understand as a miner that what this is going to do is heavily impact the regulations surrounding cryptocurrency in general, but you are protected to a certain extent from a couple of key investments in particular. One being that we're a proponent of on this particular channel is hardware, period, right? Because at the end of the day, you are going to have a much better, and this is, not financial advice, but what I would look at targeting is you're going to have a much better chance at reselling hardware at the top of a bull run than you are going to be pulling out your staked Ethereum and selling it for so many different reasons. And not only do you have options from a mining perspective of multiple algorithms that could be relevant with any particular piece of hardware, but you aren't also being stuck. Well, that means that essentially you aren't being stuck in a particular ecosystem, which means that you have a much more flexible asset, right? And yes, this does apply to things like Flux nodes. And that is why when people have asked me about Flux nodes, I don't say that I think that it's a good idea. I think that if I looked at it from basically a position of flexibility with my asset, I'm looking at mining equipment. That is how I look at it. That being said, it's still the same concept. You buy low, sell high, right? It's going to be really interesting to see Luxor's, basically eBay or auction house get set up for ASIC miners and we're going to start to see real competitive markets within the ASIC industry, and it is needed, and it's going to be a completely separate trading game that you're going to be able to play. This is where I'm focusing a lot of my attention on buying in large quantity at low prices of hardware. Whether or not you can power it on is some of the things that I'm personally looking at. Now, moving on from there, we really just have a few announcements to get through real quick. I did want to talk about Ironfish here. One of the things that's been really interesting that I've been participating in is their incentivized test nets. Now, there is a downside. We talked about this where the incentivized test nets for Ironfish does require an email, but you can just spoof whatever email you want. Maybe use a Proton email address is what I would recommend. That sort of thing if you're really paranoid here. But their testnet for phase 3 will be wrapping up on March 7th. And that will give their team time to work on the mainnet launch later that month. So this is getting pretty cool. We are about to see basically a mainnet launch for the Ironfish network. And I'm extremely stoked on this because what we're talking about is essentially SSL for cryptocurrency or for DeFi and all that. So I'm really hot on this project. I'm going to keep my eye on it. I don't have any, like, I have my incentivized test nodes, which means that presumably for participating in it, I will get some ironfish in return for having participated in these. If you want to participate in this, you can go to their website and, all you have to do is stand up a node. There's some other additional benefits like minting some assets, that sort of thing that you can do to get additional rewards. As far as like power consumption, all that, it doesn't require a lot. So you can use, whatever PC you have laying around at the house. And it's one of those things. This is a speculative mine type thing. There's no exchange. Hell, there's not even a real blockchain out yet, right? The main net's not launched. These are test nets. This is ground floor potential. What are we always looking for, especially through a bear market, are opportunities that are low cost, basically free, that have high upside, right? It doesn't cost a lot of power to run a node for this. You have a very high upside, right? This is higher than even mining or spec mining something like, for example, kaspa, right? This has a much higher potential and a much lower barrier to entry. So just wanted to bring that up with you guys. We are looking at mainnet launch for March. So just pay attention to that as it goes. Now, Novo has also moved to novoblock.org. I just wanted to let you guys know this. A community member, I Need Money, had posted about it. I think he obviously works with Novo. I wanted to make sure that you guys were aware that it moved in case you're like, where'd the website go? If you want to do more research on Novo, feel free, novoblock.org. It is a fork. Keep that in mind. But, you have the quick comparison charts here between Bitcoin, ETH, Doge, and Novo. You have block size here. You have layer 1 scalability and the UTXO based model. Most of this stuff, like they're comparing with coins that have been out for forever. And the reason why I just bring that up just in general is that a majority of these specifications are pretty much shared by a majority of newer proof of work projects that, date back all the way to like Ergo has UTXO, there's not a lot super special here. Just to keep in mind, like all of these things are always going to have like advertisement that look, if you compare a 2023 Chevy Silverado to a 2012 Chevy Silverado or to a 2012 Dodge Ram, that's a better comparison. It doesn't mean that the 2023 Dodge Ram is inferior to the 2023 Chevy Silverado. I mean, in my opinion, it is, but it doesn't mean that inherently, right? I'm a Chevy guy. And I'll stick with my 2012 Chevy Silverado. But that being said, I just want to make sure you guys understand that concept. Now, big deal here. We did the how to mine Dynex coin. They are having issues with their web wallet. You can still do the node wallet. I'm going to work on a guide for you guys on the node wallet. The guide on the channel utilizes the web wallet. That's because for ease of use, I thought that would be the best. Obviously, they've had a ton of issues with this. In particular, though, everything for your wallet is still being tracked on chain. It's just that at this point, the web wallet is syncing and then you'll get access back to it. I still am not a fan of the web wallet at all for Dynex. It's by far the biggest red flag that they currently have. There's no way to export your private keys, so you can't recover it to a node wallet. Honestly, it's been unreliable as heck. It is probably the worst experience of a web wallet I have ever had. And there's been some pretty bad ones. So, at this point, I would, even if this gets back up and is functioning, as soon as it is, if you've been utilizing the web wallet, get a simple node wallet stood up, a simple wallet up, get your Dynex out of here, right? As soon as this thing syncs, Get it sent to one where you have control over the keys, and just be safe out there, boys. That being said, we also have announcements from Conflux, in particular talking about Nucleon. This one's kind of interesting. Now, Conflux, obviously a proof of work coin, but they do have liquidity staking available. Well, they had staking available, and now they're moving into liquidity staking, meaning you have a token system built on top of it, not dissimilar from what you saw with Ethereum. What this is going to allow individuals to do in particular is going to have kind of a fluid staking system. But keep in mind, once again, this is exactly the same as having a wrapped version of staked Ethereum, right? This is a wrapped version of staked Conflux from the best that I can tell. The actual coin, the actual Conflux, is going into Nucleon's proof of stake pool. You can read this entire question and answer Q&A down below, but what you need to understand is it's a token XCFX that then you are able to buy, and it represents staked Conflux in Nucleon's proof of stake pool. From a perspective of how I would approach that, I would be very cautious, right? Because this does mean that you are reliant to a certain extent on this pool being not only operational, but also being above board and all that sort of stuff. So be extremely careful with this one as far as like investing into it, but it is important to understand that the path that Conflux is going does put it closer to the decentralized finance capabilities of both Ergo and Ethereum, which is relevant right now because and Ethereum Classic, the only options for this type of functionality is on Ethereum Classic and Ergo currently, right? Those are the only I guess we could say Ethereum Fair, I don't count that. Ethereum Proof of Work, I don't count that. We could count those other two forks. But the big dogs, the ones that really have the most potential, for being completely honest, it's Ergo and Ethereum Classic. Now we're seeing a third party enter another party here with Conflux. So this could be a little bit of bullish news for them. But we are in a bear market, and if we're being completely honest, as we are with everything else, it's all tied to Bitcoin at the end of the day to a certain extent. So just wanted to bring this up and let you guys know that. We also have a very odd announcement from Flux. Now, here's the deal. I think like there's a little bit of ego going into this particular post, and the way that I've been seeing a lot of reactions from Flux community members, as well as, you know, Flux people that work at Flux, that sort of thing, as it pertains to proof of useful work, is them wanting to make a distinction. The original thing that they were really starting to do, and this is kind of odd, like it's a weird ego play that I think should have just been left alone because the optics are just childish, in my humble opinion. I'm sorry, Daniel. Like my optics on this whole like rebranding from proof of useful work to Flux proof of useful work is just, it's silly at best. Like, if it works and it does what it says and it is a form of proof of useful work and Flux does it the best and the most accurately defined, then let it speak for itself. This is just a weird one, right? So they said they're pleased to share that ZIL hash naming will be retired and Flux proof of useful work will take its place. Since Flux is the only true proof of useful work, it comes at a fitting time, and proof of work is essential to the long-term viability of blockchain projects. I would have left it alone, just kept advertising as proof of useful work. I guess getting distinction, sure. It's just kind of weird. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below, as well as in the live chat. I'm curious what you think. I thought it was very odd. But it happened. So if you hear Flux proof of useful work and you're wondering what that is, there you go, right? Let's talk about miner releases for the week. And what we got is Team Black Miner version 1.85. It came out yesterday. They added dual and triple mining for Ravencoin, ZIL, Ravencoin, Ethereum Classic, and ZIL. And then they improved switching code for KAS with less rejected shares. They added support for SSL mining and plus VTC, or plus Vertcoin and plus Ravencoin. Both pools have to be SSL pools. And they reduced stale shares, and they tried to fix performance loss on the NVIDIA CMP cards. I am impressed that Team Black Miner is continuing to develop through the bear market. This could put them in a good position moving into the next bull run. Remember, like as we see these types of things, like miners that we thought weren't going to be a thing in the previous bull run because of popular miners from the bull run before that, you know, became relevant because they continued development through a bear market. If you are a mining software developer, the best thing you can do is add as much support for as many coins and algorithms, etc., as possible, because you don't know, we don't know, nobody knows what's going to take that kind of big revenue place of Ethereum for GPU miners. And there will be something, right? Because at the end of the day, we could say GPU mining is dead completely, but we thought that back in 2012 when Bitcoin or whatever had ASICs come out onto the network, and then boom, Ethereum came along, right? There is always something new on the horizon, and being prepared for whatever is new on the horizon is the best thing that you can do. This also means as a GPU miner yourself, you don't have to be mining at a loss, but you can turn on your rigs, play with a new coin, figure out how the overclocks work, play with a new algorithm so that you're ready. Have those flight sheets, have those overclocks ready to go in your Hive OS machine so that when something starts spinning up, you're ahead of the game, not behind the game, right? This is the time to completely prepare from a hardware perspective, from a power perspective, from a knowledge perspective. Your job is to be prepared now. As a cryptocurrency miner, especially as a GPU miner, your job is to be preparing for what comes next. And it will come, because we have not broken into a macro cycle, meaning that we can be fairly certain over at least probably the next 2 Bitcoin halvings that we will see the same cycle repeat itself. That means, yes, you have a great opportunity here if you're willing to go ahead and take that risk, right? And there's risk there still, but you have that potential. We have a new release from Gminer as well, 5 days ago for version 3.28. Improved overclocking subsystem fixes bugs with overclock switching while ZIL mining round. And then improved hash rate reporting while ZIL mining round. Removed hash rate drawdown for primary algorithms. So still continuing to see some updates here. You can also go ahead and get your Hive OS updated. I like to see this. Why do I like to see this? Well, development on Hive has been a little bit behind. They've been focusing a lot on ASICs because that's where they have opportunity to still make money through the bear market. I understand. I get it. At the same time, we have a lot of people that are still, you know, trying to deploy new miners and new features on Hive OS, and having an option here straight up for them to give you on the GitHub to have compatibility with MMPOS and Hive OS is amazing. So good work, guys. Gminer continue to do that. You know, other mining software developers, you know, see what they're doing there and actually follow suit. I think at this point, you can't expect right now at this point for any of these operating system, you know, developers to come out, you know, update to your latest miner in a timely manner. 4 days ago, also, we had LOL Miner version 1.67, improved Nexa performance on NVIDIA 2-ring-based GPUs, approximately 35% increase. This is getting crazy. Improved Nexa performance on 8GB NVIDIA Ampere GPUs by approximately 1.5% when memory is not locked, and 3% on locked memory 5000. 10GB and higher GPUs got an additional 5% performance increase. So Nexa is starting to see some scaling with memory here. Improved Nexa performance on NVIDIA Ada-based GPUs by approximately 25% on locked memory clock, and about 8% on unlocked memory. Now, I'm going to show you guys here too. We don't even have this calculated in yet, but Nexa's looking pretty hot. So they added Nexa Echelon mining protocol to support pools using it. So that is like the 137pool.io, and the needed format will be automatically detected when connecting to a pool using it. Pretty awesome. They updated the web UI for Nexa mining and more pools to support. And there is the Windows update for the GUI, and then they had some fixes. They fixed a bug causing scattered defects shared on Nexa mining on all OSs. They fixed a display bug when setting power limit on NVIDIA GPUs, saying the value is out of range, although it is fine on all OSs. They fixed a bug in Nexa mining on the mining, creating only defects in Windows. They fixed a bug in Nexa mining of the miner crashing silently after a few minutes. And it says, note one, every code update, in particular when so massive as here, because this is a big code update, may require retuning of your overclock and UV settings for ideal results and stability. Obviously, with big performance improvements like this, and the specifically as it pertains to memory, I think you are going to probably have to play with that. It says memory locking on Ada GPUs is only recommended if the core clock is locked as well and not maxed out. On high core clock in combination with memory lock to 5000, the performance will struggle due to worse memory timings. So as a general note, the Nexa GPU codes are and will be foreseeable in the foreseeable future joint work with the LEDOC from BZ Miner. Miner fees will be evenly shared regardless of which of these two flavors of the code you prefer. And BZ Miner and LOL Miner have both been working on this for a while. And I gotta say, I mean, seeing those two come together is amazing. It's just, I think having those two different options does also mean for troubleshooting, you are going to have basically same capabilities, but based on like the code base, you may find that one is more reliable during one particular release and vice versa. Just gives you some more troubleshooting opportunities. Now, as far as me mining right now, I only have one GPU rig online. It is mining DNX, and I have not pulled that up though as far as the pool goes. So I'll have to get to that a little bit later. That being said, I am mining with my Kadena miner, which is an IB Link BMK3, and that is up and running here. It's been extremely profitable. I have enjoyed mining with it quite a bit, but our revenue is going down. Whereas we were doing, 16 Kadena a day, we dropped down to 15, 14, then we were back up to 15. Now we're down to 13. Presumably what's happening here is the difficulty on the network is going up due to the release of the KA3 from Bitmain. This one is still competitive if you are running it essentially at the low power mode. I believe Red Panda Mining has a guide on putting this in low power mode, so you can go check that out. I'll work on doing one as well, so you guys have it here on this channel as well to review. But it is still profitable, so there you go. That being said, the other miner that we have that is profitable is a Sia coin miner, which is doing 491 gigahash a second and doing about 98 Sia coin a day. You can check more out on this one in particular on sonofatech.locals.com. Getting into miner profitability or GPU mining profitability on hashrate.no, because frankly, they are more up to date than what to mine, and it's a lot more awesome to look at this than what to mine's negative all the time. We do have profitability across most of the GPUs on a mix between Nexa and DNX, right? So for the most part, highest profit across the board is still DNX, unless you get into, I believe it's like situations where, yeah, so situations where you're on AMD, where kaspa is going to kind of take over here, right? And then I thought we had, well, it kind of bounces around, right? So as it sits right now, and this is interesting that the A380 is up here. By the way, this is what we need to test because Ergo is supported for mining on the ARC A750 now. I got to get that out for you guys. Actually, in fact, we're playing video games tonight. I'm going to do this tomorrow. I'm going to get this done. I kind of want to do it tonight, but we'll do it tomorrow. We'll push it off a little bit, but we're going to get that out. We're going to get the new, all of the A750 hash rates out for you guys, especially seeing this with the A380 actually doing quite well on Ergo. The A750 might be extremely good on Ergo because remember, it was doing 50 mega hash a second at like 90 watts on Ethereum on a very unoptimized miner. So Intel could get really interesting here in general. Let's see if they have they have the A750 here showing negative profitability, but we'll check it out and see where we're really at. I don't know if this is completely true. And I don't see it. What's it saying as far as hash rate? AutoLicos is saying 140 mega hash a second. I know on Ethereum Classic, though, we are getting 50 mega hash a second. And this is showing 179 watts. This is way off. This is like 90 watts at 50 mega hash a second. So their calculations here are actually way off on the 750. So we'll get to work on that for you guys here soon. Let's get into this after ASIC miner profitability. We have the KA3 at top, doing $30 a day on Kadena, and then scrolling down from there, we have the L7, still rocking that Doge and Litecoin merge mining, so keep that in mind. And we got the Gold Shell HS3 doing 763 on HNS. I highly recommend you go look at my locals. Got the iPolo V1. Nothing else has really changed. Let's take a look at the S19 Pro, which is sitting at like nothing. Let's see. Probably negative on everything or what? No. Hit the S19. What are you doing here? Digibyte, yeah, everything's at a loss. So there you go. Let's take a look at the mining pools. We are seeing I believe that's a decrease in hash rate on Bitcoin, down to 278 exahash a second. Price is down 7.67%. If we move on from there, we'll take a look at all of the Ethereum coins. Ethereum Classic is down 8.44% over the past 7 days, still sitting pretty steady at 121 terahash a second. Ethereum Proof of Work is down 20% over the past 7 days, and it's sitting at 17 terahash a second. And Ethereum Fair is down 7% over the past week and is at 1.34 terahash a second. Zilliqa is down 7% over the past 7 days and is sitting at 38.48 terahash a second. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of our favorites. We got Ergo up in here to take a look at, down 4.79% over the past 7 days, sitting at 32 terahash a second. If we take a look at Flux, we are looking at being down 21% over the past 7 days, into that 70-cent range that we called earlier this week for you guys. And we are seeing a drop off on hash rate. The hash rate's going to have to come down quite a bit more, though, really. In reality, we're going to have to see this drop to like, I don't know, 3 mega solutions a second or something along those lines before I think it really could make up for the drop here. Part of this is market. Part of this is just literally a repeat of what happened to them on their last halving. The timing of the Flux halving kind of hitting in what is guaranteed to be a Bitcoin bear market every time is an interesting kind of situation for them to be in. It's not good, right? I mean, essentially, not interesting situation. It's a not good situation, right? Because you will always see Flux go through the halving during the downtime of the Bitcoin halving cycle. So, you know, it is what it is. It's always going to be like that until we bump into like a macro cycle on Bitcoin, which I still think we're about 12 years out from, if I had to take a guess. We're down 8% almost over the past 2 weeks on Ravencoin, and it is sitting at 12 terahash a second on the network. Now, tomorrow I do have an interview with a Lithium dev, so I want to go ahead, Alf. So I wanted to go ahead and look at where they're at. They're down 15% over the past 7 days and sitting at 25 terahash a second. I hope you guys will tune in tomorrow for that. And we have a very special video that I'm not going to talk about that will be coming out on Sunday for you guys too over here on YouTube, so you can be ready for that. Let's go ahead and get into questions and answers for the day. Remember, super chats are never required, always appreciated. First to be answered because they're the easiest to read. I like to see everybody up in the hizzy. We even got DP Unique back up in the house over here. So make sure you guys tell him thank you for all the early work help on Son of a Tech. Without him, I wouldn't be here. Miguel, thank you for the $5 super chat. Says, what's up? It's Sofo here. What's up, dude? Welcome to the stream. Remember, tag at Son of a Tech if you have a question, and I'll get to it. XRP the Goat says, at Son of a Tech, I didn't even know Antminer L5 existed till yesterday, but you just scored one. Congratulations. Let me know how you like it. XRP the Goat says, at Son of a Tech, I didn't know they were even real, but I grabbed, okay, I got that already. Says low power mode is 1.3 at 1100 watts. There you go. Patrick says, at Son of a Tech, happy Friday, sir. Good to see you. Good to see you too, Patrick. The Red Devil. I don't have a Red Devil. I do have over here. This actually needs to go back to another buddy. Keith Plays PC. This is a XFX reference RX. What is this? The 480? Yeah, this is the 484 gigabyte, but this one was special because this was the 484 gigabyte that actually still had 8 memory modules on it. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it was like, where are they here? No, like 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. They're back here. So they had 8 memory modules on it still, and you could flash it to the 8 gigabyte model and get and still mine ETH with it, which was cool. All right. Matt K says, that's Son of a Tech. What do you think about Nexa as a project versus something like Kaspa? Looking at their site, it looks like a lot of buzzwords and thin on any real reason to mine it for the long-term hold. I mean, anything you mine for the long-term hold is a risk, but Nexa is a BCH fork. It's a profitability thing. Meaning, you know, if you can get in and out of those exchanges for a good profit, then do that, you know, take the profit and purchase, you know, what you believe in. That's what I always say. As far as like Nexa versus Kaspa, they're completely different, right? Like Nexa's a fork, Kaspa's ground up. Kaspa has a ton of advantages from that perspective. Hugo Down, thanks for the $10 super chat. Says, great show. Thanks for what you do. Thanks for supporting the channel for so long, my man. And La Sombra says, do you still mine? Yes, we just talked about what I was mining just a little bit ago. So here shortly, we're going to be streaming Hogwarts Legacy over on sonofatech.locals.com as well as on Rumble. I will get this link out to you guys right now. Here is the Rumble link. And if you join me over on Locals, that is much appreciated as well. I'll get this link out for you guys too. Locals is a better chat. Oops, I messed up that last one, so we'll do that. Okay. Devil King Gaming says, do you think Ethereum will fork back to proof of work? We already talked about that earlier in the episode, so go ahead and rewind to that. It'll also be clipped later in the week. Gender Legacy. There are only... You thought I was going to say it. Come on over to Locals and Rumble to see what I think about all that. And I'll see you guys next Tuesday. Thanks for hanging out. Haha, got him.